Glad you enjoyed today's Q&A with Innovators and hashtag Black Steam. I'm Gerard. Let's get inspired today. Hello, everybody. My name is Gerard Buckner with the Mortgage Institute for Research and part in the Discovery Building. Today, I am joined by Tarik Moody, a talk show radio host out of Milwaukee. We're excited to have this conversation and talk about more in Black history and talk about the STEAM of radio. So really excited to get this conversation started. For those at home, while we're having this conversation, if you are inclined to ask some questions, just post some notes and ideas, please feel free to use the hashtag Black Steam Innovators on all social platforms. We will be diving into the conversation on multiple platforms. And if you have any questions for Tarik or anything about this series, we will be sure to connect with you as soon as possible. All right. Good morning, Tarik. How you doing?
Good morning. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. Would you like to just introduce yourself to the world? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Tarik Moody. I am currently the Director of Digital Strategy and Innovation for Radio Milwaukee. I'm also a content producer. I'm on air Monday through Fridays. I also have a radio show called Rhythm Lab Radio, which is will be syndicated now in 5 cities at the end of this month. I also run a program called 889 Labs, which is a program to make tech, get more people interested in tech and make tech more accessible and inclusive. And I do a lot of stuff at the station. I write content. I do podcasts. I have a food podcast. I've done a podcast on systemic racism called By Every Measure. And I have a podcast coming out March 1st called Diverse Disruptors, where we tell the stories of diverse entrepreneurs, innovators, and leaders in tech and business. That comes out March 1st.
Wow, that's a lot going on. How do you find the time?
There's more, but I don't know how much time we have, actually. There's a lot more.
Where can people find your podcast?
Oh, you can find it at radiomilwaukee.org. Just click on podcasts, or just search for, if you're interested about the food, search This Bites over on your favorite podcast service, or By Every Measure, also at radiomilwaukee.org. And search that on your favorite Spotify, Apple, wherever you want. And Diverse Disruptors, there's a pilot episode with an amazing woman, Sherelle Dorsey. Definitely you should check her out. She is a journalist. She started a platform called The Plug, where she reports on the Black innovation economy. That's the pilot episode. Just look for Diverse Disruptors wherever you get your podcast.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, I'll probably ask you that question again towards the end so people can be able to tap into that. So awesome. So we connected, like I mentioned, by one of our coworkers who mentioned you, and she had talked about you doing a talk for University of Madison. Could you dive in a little bit about what was that about?
Well, that was weird. I never done it before, to be honest. It was a talk about me. Like they asked me hey, you want to give a talk? Like, yeah, like, what do you want me to talk about? And they're like, we want to talk about you. I'm like, whoa, okay, that's never happened before. So they want to know my journey. So basically it's my journey, my personal and professional journey through life and what led me to what I do now. So basically it's a talk and basically all my life, I basically, in a nutshell, my life was, I guess, framed by tech, like all the opportunities, everything I've done indirectly or directly was related to tech. I talked about growing up and how my parents scraped and saved for a first computer when I was like 9 or 8. I took that computer, started playing games, and discovered code behind games, got interested in programming. This is like I'm dating myself, like 83, 84. I'm like 19 years old. I started learning basic language, programming at 9, 10, before it was a thing, right? There was no careers in computer programming. There was no Steve Jobs, no Mark Zuckerberg, none of that. And I just dived into it. And my parents kind of pushed me that way. And while kids went to cool summer camps, I went to a computer program camp. And it was a 5-day camp. I remember it was Charleston, South Carolina. And I learned all about loops and all this stuff about programming basic. And they had a final project. My project was blackjack. I made a blackjack game using ASCII characters because me and my mom used to play blackjack a lot when I was a kid. Yeah, good influence. My mom teaching me about cards at that young age. But yeah, so it was my journey. Like I really talked about my journey into get into with the Howard University architecture program. So I used to be an architect, practice architecture, which people are like, how'd you get from architecture to or now? And I talked about just stepping outside of my box and volunteering and just want to learn new things. So that's basically was just my journey of just experimenting and taking on new challenges and new opportunities.
Well, those are some good hints about your talk, because basically we're gonna almost talk about the same thing. So I mean, for those people that missed that talk, this is an amazing opportunity, because I'm really excited. I didn't get to hear all that. I did hear about the architect work, and I'm really interested on how that transformed.
Yeah.
But that was awesome. You already kind of talked about where you're from, but you want to go more into that? Are you originally from? Did you say North Carolina?
South Carolina. No, I am. Milwaukee is my ninth city since I've been born.
Okay.
I was born in Louisville, Kentucky. Moved very young to Houston, Texas, and then moved to Atlanta, Georgia, Stone Mountain, Georgia, right outside Atlanta. Moved to Charleston, moved back to Atlanta, but Atlanta middle school and high school through Atlanta, and going to college at DC. So most of my life I spent in Atlanta, but also lived in Birmingham, Alabama. When I graduated college, I lived in Minneapolis and Detroit, and then ended up here.
Whoa. Were a lot of those moves as a youth?
Yeah, a lot of the youth, like part of the moves were the youth. My dad worked for Gulf Oil, which became British Petroleum. So they moved him around with his job. And then when I got to college, I was in DC with the Howard University. I graduated. I left DC, went to Detroit. And when my first major job, it was as a practicing architecture, was a design manager for Northwest Airlines in Detroit. They promoted me and moved into Minneapolis, where they were based. Now Northwest Airlines is now bought up by Delta. But when I was in Detroit, I worked on the major terminal in Detroit, which is now Delta's terminal, Delta's hub. And then I moved to Minneapolis as a full-fledged design manager for Northwest Airlines. So the other part of my life, I moved on my own. And when I was young, my parents moved around.
Mm-hmm. And so what was that transformation of like getting from being an architect to then like hopping the radio?
Well, it's a funny story. So I had no family when I moved to the Midwest. So when I moved to Detroit, no family, no friends. And then I got promoted to go to Minneapolis, same thing. And it was cold. So, a Southern boy, not used to the cold weather, not very happy to see what winter was like. And being the fact that I didn't have any friends or family made it even tougher. So I was like, if I want to stay here, if I want to try to make it work, I need to get out, meet people, figure out, and I didn't know how to best do it. I'm naturally an introvert, so I'm not like a person who goes out, like tries to shake people's hands all the time. Mm-hmm. Someone gave me on, I think it was a blind date, gave me tickets to a kind of a hip hop show at 7th Street Entry, which is the side venue of First Avenue, which most people probably heard of. First Avenue is where Prince performed during Purple Rain and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So it was a hip hop show put on by a local community radio station, radio show actually. And I went to it just to like get out and like just maybe I meet somebody and just to, get out of my house or apartment. And so I went, and it was really cool. I got to see a group called Atmosphere at the time, which is a part of the Rhyme Series crew. And I saw a table over there for the radio station, and it was sponsored by a show called Groove Garden. And I was like, wow, this is a cool show. This is cool. I want to know more about this station. They had a table to volunteer and sign up to volunteer at the station. So I was like, oh, why not? So I signed up to volunteer at the station, and I went down, and they had a orientation. A couple of weeks later, I went down. They gave us a little tour of the station, and they asked, hey, what do you like to volunteer for? What do you want to do? And I said, I would love to like learn about being like a radio engineer, producer kind of thing. And they're like, well, we don't really have anything like that. Do you want to? They go like, you have a good voice. You want to host the news? I'm like, no, I don't. I don't want to. I want to be behind the scenes. That's not what I want to do. I don't want to be on the mic. Well, like you should try it. Like, okay. So they got me reading the news I think it was either Tuesday or Wednesday evening at 6 p.m. Mm-hmm. But I really wanted to like help out on that show. I saw the women's show, the radio show, Groove Garden. And so I did that. Finally got to meet her, I get a chance to talk to her. I was like, hey, I'd love to help you on the show. She kind of first said, no, I'm good. I don't need any help. I don't want you there. Then finally, I think I badgered her enough to let me come down and hang out and shadow her. And then eventually, after a while, I became her co-host and producer. So I did that on this radio show called Groove Garden for about 4 or 5 years. And then that led to like hosting another show with 3 other DJs, like supporting the local music scene. So it was a local music show. And I did that as well. Then I actually got involved in DJing. So I started buying turntables and records, and like, I have like currently now over 2,000 records in my house. And I started DJing out, and I met my DJ partner at the time. He came to the station for an interview because he used to be part of a rap group. We got talking about jazz, and my first gig was DJing jazz out in the city. Then I started getting more gigs, and I'm still doing architecture. So I was at Northwest Airlines at the time. And then, so I was doing that at the radio for a while. Then September 11th happened, and I got laid off from Northwest Airlines a month later after September 11th. So I'm sitting there having more time to like look at my life and trying to figure out things, and got more into the music scene in Minneapolis and more into DJing. While I was looking for a job, I had a temp job working for a real estate developer. And then eventually I got a job again with the architecture firm. I was still DJing. Right when I got that job with the architecture firm, a new station called Minnesota Public Radio started a new station called The Current, which is kind of like the station I'm at now in Milwaukee. And people encouraged me to apply for my own show. So I did. That's called Rhythm Lab Radio, which I still do to this day, and is now in 5 cities. And that was like over 15 years ago. And I got the show in The Current. I got a little money for it, so I was actually getting paid for something I love to do. Not a lot, it's just a few hours a week. Mm-hmm. And I was doing that, still practicing architecture, working towards my license in architecture to become a certified architect. Like, that was my focus. I had great friends. I had like a girlfriend at the time. So my life was like shaping up. I had gigs. I was spending at the Walker Art Museum. I was like spending at sushi bars. It was like perfect, almost like a perfect life. Right. And then I get a call from somebody in Milwaukee, starting a station at the time, which is now where I work. Heard my show, knew I liked tech for some, I don't know how they figured that out. Wanted to talk to me. And I was going to like, Milwaukee, like, what's in Milwaukee? It's a bunch of cows or something. Okay, whatever. I'm not even thinking about it. Like, honestly, I was like, I'm happy. Right. Mm-hmm. And like, we'll fly. Yeah, we just want to have a talk. I'm like, cool, you're paying for it, whatever. Sure. I'll check out, Milwaukee. I don't know anything about that place. They flew me out, and I'm like, oh, you're on a lake. I didn't know that. And they had a conversation, and like, we talked about my radio show, talked about my thoughts on music and tech and social, all this stuff. And then I flew back, forgot about it. Like, that was cool, whatever. 2 weeks later, they called me back and said, hey, what if we offer you a job based off what we had a conversation off? And I'm like, I get Milwaukee, right? And I said, I don't know. I mean, I'm like, I have a girlfriend, I have all this stuff. It's like, I finally found my place in Minneapolis. Took like almost 8 years to get like friends and stuff. And you're telling me come to a city smaller than Minneapolis that I don't know nothing about and change careers. Like, I don't even know how much you pay. Like, is radio a lot of money? Is like I'm like, I don't know anything about the industry. So what happened was I was about to say no, but I talked to my dad, and he goes like, well, it seems like you enjoy this. If you don't do this, you might sit there and regret it and think about like, what if, or should I? Like, if you take it, you can always come back. Just figure out how much if they're willing to pay you what you want, try it. So I did. I made an offer. They didn't really bulk up the offer, which made me mad, which I could have probably asked for more thinking about it right now. But, that's how I got into radio. And then here I am, over 14 years later, almost in Milwaukee.
Wow. Well, yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, you're way past like being new, but yeah. Welcome. That's super cool. Yeah, and like to think about that jump and that risk. I mean,
yeah, it was a
inspirational quotes within that.
I mean, I love architecture, I love design, I love what I was doing, but it was sort of like my dad made a point. Like, nothing wrong. If you enjoy it, why not try it?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Like, if you don't like it, you can. It's just like if you don't like a certain food, don't eat it. Mm-hmm. Stop eating it, right? Mm-hmm. You don't have to be forced to do this.
Right. Absolutely. Cool. Well, I mean, being in radio, and I mean, with this pandemic, has there been any changes within like your normal work? How has COVID-19 affected you?
Well, as you can see, I'm home with a mic. My bed is over here, so I've been at home doing all my shows and stuff, and since March. So I haven't been. I go to station probably every 4 to 6 weeks to get mail. So that's the biggest way. So I do my show from my studio, my home. So that's the biggest thing. Um, Also, we shifted how we did programming. Like when pandemic hit, we adapted. Radio, our station is really, it's a community station, it's a public station, but we adapted to what people are going through and adjusted our programming for that. Like we created all this new program like Kids Disco, right? People are staying at home, parents or kids at home, give families do something. So we created a programming on Saturday called Kids Disco, Saturday morning, where people wake up and dance with the kids. And we had a School of Rock where every Friday, was it every Friday? I think it was every Friday. I can't remember what it was, where we did, music lessons on artists for parents and kids. So we had and he had a resource guide. So we did a School of Rock on Prince and David Bowie and made it educational and fun. And parents could download all these PDF resources. So we adapted our programming. But one of the unfortunate things about pandemic, which affected like everybody, was donations went down, and underwriting, our revenue is basically donations and underwriting, which is kind of like ads for public radio. Those businesses got hurt, so we lost a lot of revenue, and we had to restructure. I guess the nice way of saying we had to lay off some people, and we're trying to come out of it stronger. And things are happening, like my show, Rhythm Live Radio, started getting syndicated during the pandemic. People wanted the show. I think it also has something to do with the racial reckoning in the country, and public radios also having their own racial reckoning of not being as diverse and inclusive as a public property should be. So those are some of the things that happen. It transformed. It gave me time to think about who I am and what to do, with my professional life and personal career. I finished going through an incubator. I've been working on a startup myself, a music streaming startup. I don't think I would have been working on this if it wasn't for that. I determined, like, also looked at my life and like, hey, I turned 50. I can't believe I said that, in the 3 years. And I wanted, like, what I want to do with myself. Like, I've been developing all these professional goals for myself, but I never have any personal goals. Right. And what is I want to do? What thing would I like to do when I turn 50? Right. I don't want a sports car. I don't want to, something like how midlife crisis person does, go crazy and buy something stupid. I found out, like, I love sake. Like, I'm a big fan of sake. I've been loving sake since I got out of college. And I like, you know what? I want to learn more about sake. I love to brew sake by the time I turn 50. Like, be great to have my own sake brewery by the time 50. So I said, like, that's 3 years. That seems reasonable. And I emailed the sake Brewers Association of North America and say, hey, I'm this African American. I think I'll be the first Black person if I do this in the world to have a sake brewery. Like, I know nothing about where I need to begin with this. Like, if I want to start a beer brewery, I have resources here, right, in Milwaukee, so I can figure that out pretty easily by talking to people and touring breweries. But I don't have that luxury of sake, right? Like, most of the sake breweries are in Japan. There's a handful out east and west, but I'm not traveling anywhere. So they basically come out, why don't you take this course that's actually starting soon? It's called the Sake Professional Course. Normally it's held in California, Japan. I paid for it with my stimulus money. And I took the course. I did, like, during January. It was both weekends. Every weekend in January. It was a very intense course, but it was fun. Learned a lot about science of sake, which is interesting. Learned about the culture and science, which kind of applies to this whole steam thing, right? And the history of sake, and like, I got into it really, and I passed. They had exam a few weeks ago. Passed exam. That was a tough test, multiple choice test, because you think you knew it, but then, like, how they answer the question, and there's a lot of Japanese terms you have to remember, and some of those Japanese terms sound similar. And so officially I got a certificate, be a sake professional. And so that's what happened during the pandemic, and the podcast, the By Every Measure, took off. A lot of people want to know more about that. We did events around By Every Measure, extended the life of the podcast. I got more into cooking again. So like it, you know, when you don't have time to sit in a commute and be in meetings and traveling everywhere, you start to have more time to think for yourself. I think that was a silver lining, I think, of COVID, right? Is like, but also I had to deal with a lot of other stuff. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like people like hear, oh wow, he sounds great and happy. And I had a lot of depression, I had a lot of anxiety, stress, dealing with you know, being both Black. You probably realize, you know, watching what's happening, George Floyd and all that affected my mental state. And I already had issues with blood pressure and stuff, and it got worse. And I ended up in the hospital with chest pains and overnight. So it wasn't all like, you know, a perfect year. So I just want to let people know it's not like I deal with that depression and mental health issues even while I'm doing all this stuff I love to do. So
yeah, man, you just made so many good points, and I won't even remember them all. But one thing that like really highlighted that I love that you said was that you really found out like what do you like versus all your professional goals. And I think especially as Americans, I think we're so focused on being able to find our profession and getting our profession, and then basically that's what makes us happy because there's the money and all that stuff that follows up behind that. So that was really cool that you mentioned that, like, no matter how old you are, like, you still got to find your happiness. And then I also want to say thank you for your vulnerability and sharing with us about depression and things like that. Because as Black men, especially, or just as Black people in general in this country, there's things we face. And I wonder, one of the questions I have for you was like, how was it, you know, being on radio and having, you know, a race issue happen right in your backyard?
It was interesting. One, it brought a lot of stress and anxiety. But you know, I've been there before. I was in college when Rodney King happened. Our station like really focused on dealing with these issues in a serious way. Like the podcast we've done on systemic racism, we had stories on our website covering protests and stuff. We talked about it. We even talked about it through music. So it was a lot. We even talked about how we handle it internally, like who are we as an organization going forward to deal with these issues of race and gender issues as well. So those are some of the things that kind of happen.
Well, awesome. I hope you were able to, you know, change the radio in that way and being able to be able to get that stress out too by speaking on radio. One thing I have about radio is I don't really know how it works. So what is the theme behind radio? How are you able to get your signal across? I don't know if we're able to hear your signal here in Madison, but if so, like, how does that happen?
Good question. I can give a kind of a basic dumb answer to that. Basically, the station has a bunch of gear in our station. We call it the rack room, and it's all this technology and computers and stuff. And our boards and audio computers are connected to that rack room. And there's some devices that translates those digital signals to kind of this analog signal, and that's piped through a kind of a internet cable to an antenna to the school. I think I can't remember where it's located. Either go back to school or go back to an antenna. So basically, signal goes back to another device that goes to an antenna and translates that signal to an antenna, and then that's how it works. So it's basically taking digital to analog through internet pipelines, and then there's a converter that converts it into an antenna, basically, in a nutshell. I don't want to quote. I mean, it's more to that than that, but that's kind of how it works. We used to have a engineer, full-time engineer, but we have a consultant that does that. But I try to stay away from all that stuff.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
I can tell you how streaming works. Like streaming is very simple. Like streaming, we pipe the audio through a server. We have a streaming server, and that gets converted, and that gets sent to a service that kind of scales up that stream to allow for more people to listen to it. So we have a service called Stream Guys. So we have a streaming server local that gets pushed to a service that kind of scales the stream up so more people can listen to it.
Oh, okay, cool. Kind of question about that too. For since podcast is like one of the big things happening right now during the pandemic, do you have any advice around the podcast world?
Like getting into podcasts?
Yeah, getting into podcasts, getting your podcast to elevate and get listeners.
I think the first thing, don't just get in a podcast because it's a trend or you think you'd make money off of it. If you think that's the case, then you will fail. If you have a story to tell and an interest to tell and you care about that, that's how you should get in a podcast. And do something that you care about. Don't just do something because, I'm gonna get on TikTok, do some dances, but why? Like, it's kind of like that. So find something that like you find like you care about and you want to tell a story and connect with people that way. And your passion. And if you do it consistently, and that's a big thing, consistently, it will grow. You will find an audience.
That's and it sounds like that's been your story anyway. Of starting off with volunteering the radio and then obviously turning into a career, not even really sure you want to even turn into a career. All right, thank you. Well, thank you so much for answering these questions. One last question I have for you was, what advice do you have for somebody you may have inspired today?
The biggest advice is get out of your comfort zone, get out of your box. If you find something interesting, and don't get scared, like don't be comfortable, because if you get comfortable, then you're just not going to be able to push yourself or find an opportunity. And the second advice, if somebody presents you an opportunity, think about it. Don't go straight, say no. Think about it, because you never know what that opportunity might lead to. So those are the two things. Get out of your comfort zone. That's life's too short to be comfortable.
Absolutely. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. Would you care to share again how people can hear your radio show or your podcast?
Yeah, just head to radiomilwaukee.org. My music show is called Rhythm Lab Radio. You can search for that on Google. You'll find it. We're on Mixcloud. And the podcast, just go to radiomilwaukee.org/podcasts, or search your favorite podcast platforms for By Every Measure or Diverse Disruptors. And if you like food, check out This Bites.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much again for joining us. And for those at home watching, thank you for joining and watching. If you have any questions, comments, all those things again, please use the hashtag #BlackSTEAMInnovators on any platform, and we will be sure to connect with you as soon as possible. All right, have a good day.
Thanks.